My background, I'm an accountant. Before that, I was also a lawyer. And in 2011, through a series of events, I was introduced to Bitcoin. And my initial reaction is probably the same as most people's reaction that are from the finance or legal fields, is that this technology sounds like it's a scam. Sounds like it's a scam. So in 2011, when I looked up Bitcoin, I saw the first thing that anybody would see in 2011 was that people utilized it to buy narcotics on the internet. And so people were buying drugs on the internet with Bitcoin. And the other articles were about the illicit activity. And so having privileged licenses, I passed on getting involved. And a short period of time later, just because I was cognizant of the technology, I saw an article that talked about this technology being an immutable ledger. And I briefly talked about that before. The immutable ledger technology in the article caught my attention because it's impossible to have an immutable ledger. No ledgers in the history of humanity have ever been immutable. So it's really accounting terminology, and unless you're an accountant, I don't know that that would shock anybody, but it was interesting to me. I'm going to bore you guys with an accounting story for 1 minute, and then we'll get back to co-location.
Let's go.
But accounting runs the world, right? It's the operating system that runs the entire world. Right now we use double entry accounting. For a network and a technology that runs the entire planet, every bank, every government, every corporation, the rails they run on are double entry accounting. For the most important technology that runs everything on the planet Earth, you would think that there was more than 2 innovations in the history of all humanity, and you'd be wrong, because there's only been 2 innovations in accounting. The first happened 10,000 years ago. Somebody went to a market, bought sheep or cows, wrote down, I have these sheep. You add that up, that's the birth, single entry accounting. That's the birth of accounting. In the 1400s, it took a little while to innovate from 10,000 years ago. In the 1400s, they came up with a second entry. I bought 5 sheep, I paid $5. So you had debit, your asset, and a credit, the money going out. You add that up. Technology created in the 1400s. You add those 2 columns up, you get every single financial statement that all of you look at every single day. All of those were birthed from the 1400s. The double entry accounting ledgers that everybody uses are terrible technological systems. It's a terrible system. And it's terrible because it's so old. It's an antiquated system, and it is an analog system. It's not a digital system. And the problem with it at its root is that the people that control the books and records, they can change them. They can change them. And guess what? They always do. They do. They commit fraud on accounting ledgers, and then the other human risk element is mistakes. So you have fraud and mistakes on all human ledgers for the history of humanity, and that's just how it was. Nobody had any incentive to innovate double entry accounting because governments, banks, and corporations, mostly governments, they don't want to give up the power to change the ledgers. They don't want to change. They don't want that kind of change. And so the Bitcoin network thrust a new accounting innovation on all of us, which was a debit and a credit, and then proof of work, which is what you hear all the commotion about, which displaces proof of stake. Proof of work is simply a consensus mechanism run by the computers that all of you either own or are a part of here at the summit. The computers run a consensus mechanism that audits every single transaction to its inception. So you have a self-audit, you have a system self-audit, and after the audit, it's written to a third entry. So you get a single entry, a double entry, and a triple entry. Once it's written to the triple entry, it's unalterable, it's immutable. For the first time in human history, you have an unalterable record of every transaction that ever occurred. That's unique because as an auditor or as an accountant or as finance people, all of the ledgers that you get are usually wrong. They're wrong because people make mistakes. So for the first time ever, you can look at a ledger and know that it's the truth. It's the truth. It's the truth on chain. It's the first time in human history we have truth on chain that doesn't need to be audited by humans. And so if you build anything on top of that, you get a better system. So anyway, the genesis story of my involvement was that piece of information. The accounting technology is the most important part to understand in order to differentiate this technology from proof of stake, because everything is proof of stake until now. Now you have the option to have proof of work. And so you really have to understand the accounting implications of that. But as an accountant, or as a prior accountant, when I figured that out, I decided that I wanted to be an accountant for this network. Unfortunately, they're called miners, which is a really silly word, and we're stuck with the negative connotations of that for, as long as it takes for somebody who's smarter than me and better at marketing to change it. But